You must tell me all your secrets. Remember, we must share everything together. Everything.
Why would anybody watch a scum show like Videodrome? Why did you watch it, Max?
Business reasons.
Sure. What about the other reasons?
Max Wren is a victim.
I woke up with a headache.
He has been exposed to Videodrome.
I'd been hallucinating for a while, ever since...
What?
Since I first saw Videodrome.
His brain is already receiving video images.
I think that massive doses of Videodrome signal will ultimately produce and control hallucination to the point that it will change human reality.
Soon, his visions will coalesce and become uncontrollable flesh. Videodrome is seducing Max Wren.
Please, come to me now. Come to Nikki.
And Max Wren can do nothing to stop it.
What makes you think I need help?
None of our test subjects has returned to normality.
Television can change your mind. Videodrome will change your body.
Long live the new flesh.
It will shatter your reality. Videodrome, starring Deborah Harry and James Woods. A shocking new vision from the creator of Scanners. Coming soon to a theater near you from Universal Pictures.
Hello again, this is Annie Rose Malamet, and welcome back to Girls, Guts, and Giallo. And to the person who told me on my reviews that I have low production value and there's too much smacking and slurping into the mic, I have a coffee right here, so this one's for you. So I'm back again with my friend Mistrix Mars, who I will be calling Mars for the remainder of the show and not using their honorific. But Mars, how have you been? Can you tell the listeners who you are, what you're about, other episodes you've been on?
Yes, so I have been on this show before. I'm not going to name which one because it's my my non-sex worker name that I'm under. I'm just going to let you guys listen to my voice and see if you can figure it out. But yeah, I wrote a quick elevator pitch for myself before this because I needed a new one. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Mars. I'm a professional dominatrix, photographer, pornographer, and multimedia artist in New York City. My life's work is finding both pleasure and humor at the intersection of sex and abjection. Annie has described me as a putrid vampire because I've been known to suck the pus directly from a lover's cystic acne. And I think that's all you need to know about me moving forward.
Amazing. Also, you introduced yourself in the Discord as I love the smell of farts.
It's true, especially a woman's farts.
This is the perfect intro to, I've been off for a minute. I've been on a mini hiatus. I've been really, really, really busy, having a lot of things going on in my career and personal life. Thank you for sticking around, all you dedicated listeners. I see I have like almost 3,000 plays on the female gaze episode, which is amazing.
Ooh.
Yeah, and keep coming back. The schedule is a little irregular. I do all of this myself. everything. And sometimes I hire independent artists that I really, really respect and love their work, like Mars, to make promo for me or edit some of my episodes. But at the end of the day, it's all yours truly. So sometimes I have some lulls and I gotta catch up, and I have to think about how I want to make this show like exciting for me, keep it exciting and fresh. And I think, I've been doing a lot of episodes about concepts. So we had an episode about the male gaze and then another one about the female gaze. And I think when now returning to the films, I've decided I want to focus a lot more on the theory rather than the production of the film. I feel like I was doing production out of obligation, but it's just not what I'm passionate about. Like, I'm not a production historian. Like, I'm a theory girl. So while there is still going to be some of that, I really want to tailor these episodes more to theory and analysis. So that's what we've done here. And Mars, what film are we discussing today?
We're talking about Videodrome, Cronenberg's 1983 magnum opus, a favorite of many dominatrices that I know.
Oh, it's gotta be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is, I think, the third Cronenberg film that I've talked about on the podcast.
I'm so honored to be the one that gets to talk about this.
Oh, it's perfect for you. But before we get into the film, just annoying promo stuff, of course, because this is how I make my living. I make all of my money from Patreon and from freelance writing. So if you're a fan of the podcast, I know there's got to be at least 3,000 of you out there listening. You should really join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/girlsgutsjello. And I'm really, really active there. We have a Discord that's very active. I have a private website now where I screen films that another wonderful artist, Mason Buck, made for me. There's just a lot going on, bonus episodes, book club. So if you miss hearing me weekly, you can still get so much. I hate the word content. You can still engage with my work a lot more than just the free podcast episodes. So the Discord community is really, really amazing. It's a lot of like kinky, sex worker adjacent, like disabled queer freaks. So join us. We have a really good time. Patreon.com/girlsgutsjello. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So let's get into Videodrome. And Mars, tell me about the first time that you watched Videodrome and what you felt about it.
So I watched it by myself on my MacBook at age 12. I think that I found it on some silly list of like top 10 most disturbing movies ever. And it was on the same list as like Eraserhead and like, I don't even remember, just other like weirdo art house films, but some of them were I also found it on just like top 10 scariest film lists, which is interesting because I wouldn't consider it scary. I was not scared when I watched it. I was intrigued and a little bit disturbed. I remember looking at the cover for it, the cover, the like poster, the thumbnail, whatever. And it's usually the scene in which James Woods is putting his face into the television screen. And I remember making a connection between that and like the American version of the Ring series. And so I went into it thinking like, oh, it's going to be scary, haunted tech vibes, but it's not that. And it predates the Ring by a decade at least. And I remember by the end of it thinking like, I don't really know what all that was about. And that is to this day how I feel every time I watch it. By the end of it, I'm like, I don't think that was really about much of anything. It was just really weird.
Yeah, like on my end, I think the first time I watched this was also from like a scary movie list. And I think it had been on my list for a while. So this was back in like 2008 when you still had to rent DVDs from Netflix.
That's when I watched it too.
Yeah, yeah.
That's our age difference showing.
Yeah. And I rented it from Netflix, got it in my college mailbox.
Hell yeah.
And screened it for my friends because I wanted to see it. And all of my friends hated it. They were like, what the fuck just happened? What was that? It felt like it was hours long. And of course, I did not feel that way. And I've always loved this film, but I do think that it is the Cronenberg movie with like the most confused messaging. But it's one of his most famous, which is very funny too.
Yeah, it definitely, I watched it at 12 and like it a lot of it went over my head and it definitely took a lot of rewatches for it to become my favorite movie, but it's like it has such indelible imagery that it just stays with you. It really has that effect on like most people who watch it, I feel like.
Yeah, very iconic imagery. So the essay that Mars and I looked at for this episode is called Information and Entropy, the Disorganization of Narrative in Cronenberg's Videodrome. And it's by an author named Nick Redfern. And Mars, can you tell me a little bit about this essay?
Yeah, he kind of leads us through Cronenberg's intentional like disorganization of plot. Oh my God. I read this yesterday and I already feel like a bimbo. I can't just
it's actually kind of difficult. Like, it's not just that you're a bimbo. Like, this is, I have a hard time with this stuff too. He talks a lot about how David Cronenberg is influenced by William S. Burroughs' narrative structure, which if you've ever read Naked Lunch, it's a non-linear hallucinatory narrative.
That's one of those that I started and was like, I'm good.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah. It was cool to read because that's one of like the most memorable things about it is that like it you think that you understand the narrative that you're following for like I feel like the first like third of the film, and then as you get more into like the main characters' video hallucinations and video hallucinations also like existing like sort of in this in between flesh and analog video space, you're just like pulled out of any semblance of traditional narrative structure.
I mean, that's exactly what happens in William S. Burroughs' writing.
Yeah,
because he was on drugs. That's a big part of it. And Nick Redfern says that in Videodrome, the descent into narrative disorganization leaves the spectator without a determined position. Is this reality or is this television? This effect is achieved by withholding information from the viewer. So he also gets into like Baudrillardian theory. Like, please, my pronunciation, ignore it. Baudrillardian theory. And the philosopher's claims that our current society has replaced all meaning, all reality and meaning with symbols and signs, and that the human experience is a simulation of reality. Whoa, man.
Can't argue there. Like, true.
What if, like, we're just, like, in a dream? This is just someone's dream.
Sometimes it feels like I'm just in a dream, Annie.
I mean, I think at the core of this is, like, a lot of philosophy that sounds really deep, but when you look into it, you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Very, we get it.
yeah, very, we get it. And I'm not saying that to denigrate it. I'm just saying that, you know, if you feel like it's beyond your grasp, it might just be that you are overcomplicating it. It's exactly what it sounds like.
Entirely.
He also talks about the evolutionary schema of Videodrome, like how it moves through chaos and entropy theory, and loses meaning the further you go. He uses an interpretation of Baudrillard's like systems of meaning. The first phase of the image is a reflection as a basic reality. In the second phase, the image masks and perverts a basic reality. In the third phase, the image masks the absence of reality. And finally, in the fourth phase, the image bears no relation to any reality whatsoever. It's its own pure simulacrum. So Nick Redfern basically proposes that the film moves through this system. So,
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah,
By
he's
the end,
absolutely
it
right.
is not based in any reality, external or constructed within the film by the end of it.
Right. So in the first part of the film, we're in the first phase. The reflection is basic reality, so the viewer is trained to recognize the marks of traditional narration. Cronenberg exploits the viewer's familiarity with classical cinema narrative to sort of draw us in. So at first it's linear, it seems to be linear. The viewer can still distinguish between the real world and the media in the narrative. And then after Max has sex with Nikki, that's when we move into the second phase, where the image masks and perverts basic reality. It accelerates this. There's shortening number of scenes between the hallucinations so that we just kind of forget what is real and isn't.
I think sex with Debbie Harry would also completely distort my reality as well.
Oh, absolutely. Perfect casting in this, even though James Woods is disgusting.
He's putrid. I hate him.
Yeah, he's horrible. He's a horrible man. And then we move into the third phase after Max puts on like the big VR helmet and hallucinates that he's whipping the television set. And then by the end, reality has completely collapsed and we're in the fourth phase. So I would agree with this analysis. So I guess using that framework, let's power through the film. Again, I'm not going to be talking about any of the production stuff behind this film, except like tidbits and things that we've learned here and there. But like Mars said, this is a 1983 film directed by David Cronenberg, starring James Woods, Debbie Harry, and a bunch of other creeps. But those are the two that we really think about when we think of this movie, or at least what I think about. Mm-hmm. And we enter the film and it's already pretty surreal with this Civic TV logo. And Max Wren, played by James Woods, his assistant, Bridie James, is giving him like this wake-up call through his TV.
And his secretary, this bitch really records a wake-up tape for her boss every night, brings it over, physically hands it to him, and he puts it in the VCR.
Yeah, what the
and
hell?
Sets a timer so that it wakes him up. Like, how much is this woman being paid to do all this?
Why can't he just get an alarm?
That would be too easy, Andy.
Every single day. Yeah, it's immediately kind of bizarre. And Max Wren wakes up in his apartment, and I want to talk a little bit about his apartment. Mars, tell me about his apartment and like what you feel like it sets up about his character.
It's definitely dirty bachelor pad aesthetic. it stays with me the way he walks into his kitchen and he makes himself a latte on his unbelievably crusty stove, and he has old pizza lying out on the kitchen counter. He grabs a crust, dips it in his latte. He's got grease all over his face and hands, and then he starts leafing through this softcore pornography that's spread out on his kitchen table, getting the pizza grease everywhere. So I think that tells you everything you need to know about his character.
It does, and it also sets up like how chaotic he already is. So when he starts to
Yes.
hallucinate, you're like, is this just him?
Yeah.
Because his apartment is so messy, but it's also, you can tell that he has money because it's full of really expensive furniture.
Yeah. And we've got the classic fucking glass bricks
I love the
around
glass
the
bricks.
door. I mean, we love the production design on all Cronenberg films, but this one is like, whereas something like Dead Ringers has like really beautiful, pristine like sets in the beginning, this is just nasty crust from the beginning.
Yeah, and juxtaposed with all of this like nice, sleek shit that he has in his apartment.
Yes.
He's looking at this like softcore porn immediately. It's like these black and white photos that remind me of Nabayushi Araki's work, the photographer. And that leads pretty nicely into this like sketchy meeting at a hotel that Max is having with these Japanese producers. And they like show him a briefcase full of VHS tapes, and they show him a film that they're proposing for his network, which is Civic TV, Channel 83. And the film they're showing is called Samurai Dreams.
Extremely cringe, like, Orientalist film. Orientalist because, this script was not written by an East Asian person. And
Totally.
It's just softcore porn of this woman who's like, I guess supposed to be a geisha, like pulls like a very beautifully crafted wooden dildo like from a hidden place in her room, and we don't see that much happen, but I guess, sorry, no, you continue. I lost my train of thought.
You're fine. I actually interpreted it a little bit differently, in terms of like the Orientalism. I interpret it as a parody of Japanese sex cinema. I've talked before, not so much on this podcast, except in the realm of the senses episode, but in my screenings, we've talked a lot about pink films, which were Japanese sex films through the 60s into the 90s. Yeah, and I just feel like this is an imitation of a pink film. Like pink films would have titles like that, like Rope Geisha or
right.
Samurai Dreams. So I actually felt like it was more of a parody of the American obsession with Japanese sex cinema.
Oh yeah, I think that's more what I meant when I said that, but you have the knowledge base to articulate that better than me. Thank you.
And I was also thinking of, because we're going to be talking about snuff, because this film is all about snuff films. It reminds me of the movie Guinea Pig 2, Flower of Flesh and Blood, which we also watched on my stream during Snuff Month back in March. Yeah, and this was one of those films that it comes a little bit later than Videodrome, but it was one of those films that's been mistaken for real snuff. So I thought that connection was interesting. Even though it might be unintentional, thought it was worth mentioning. And one of the guys in the room, when Max is talking to his partners, back with the white guys, one of them says, I think Oriental sex is a natural. Which I also think is a parody.
Yeah. It just sets up like, okay, we're in a room with like the grossest, like most racist, misogynistic white men, like evaluating how like other people have sex.
Right. And Max is like, yeah, it's not it's not tough enough. What does he say? You have it in your notes.
Oh, it wasn't Max who said it.
Oh,
but
it's another
someone,
guy. It's not tacky enough to turn me on.
Yeah, he says like, yeah, it's too sweet. It's not tacky enough to turn me on, which I thought was, or is too much class is bad for sex, which I thought was really interesting because it's true. Like this film is like, it's like a very like sweet, slow, like beautifully produced film, and they're like, we don't want to put that on our like scuzzy public access like TV because like the North American sensibilities like want the hyper violence, they want the hypersexual, you know. I think that's where that was coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think the line, it's not tacky enough to turn me on, is so good.
It is.
Honestly, I'm kind of with him there.
No, I relate to that. Like I mean it like my own like porn watching habits are problematic at best because
same.
I always go for the fakest like tackiest lowest budget pornos to watch because for some reason that's I guess the fact that it's so fantasy oriented or like the fact that it's so constructed and not real is what gets me off.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because you said like low budget, and I think of low budget as like realer. Because I'm more interested in like high budget. Like I can't watch porn with bad lighting. I'm spoiled by movies. It bothers me if there's like a terrible production value. And that to me like moves it away into hyper reality as opposed to watching something more low budget. And I think that that's what's more exciting to me is like hyper reality.
Yeah. I'm not going to send you some links then to what I've been watching.
I mean, I would still watch it.
Oh, but you don't even want to know.
I mean, listen, what I'm watching is disgusting. I just really like nice cameras.
Oh, that's so
and
fair.
I'm really into like low budget, gross, grimy stuff, like in general. But yeah, for some reason, like it turns me on, it excites me. But for some reason, when I'm actually sitting down to masturbate, I like the big budget stuff. I don't know why.
I think that's completely fair and healthy.
Okay, so yeah, Max is like, we need something tough. Okay, and this is when we first meet Max's buddy Harlan, who calls him Patron, and this is when we see the Videodrome program. So Mars, can you describe Videodrome program? What's going on there?
Yeah, so Harlan pirates a signal from at first where he thinks is Malaysia. So just like random video signal in the ether. Have no idea how that technology works, but looking for stuff
right, like international pirating. Okay.
Looking for something interesting and subversive to put on their public access network. And he finds Videodrome, which is just a straight shot of a room where a woman is being tortured by two people in like black cloaks and hoods. The room is
like executioner
red
style.
Yeah, the room is red and orange. There's a wall of wet clay that is supposedly electrified that they are pushing her into. It's basically Dungeon Gulf.
It's brutalmaster.com.
Yeah, it's a very striking set that I haven't really seen like replicated anywhere since, honestly.
Yeah, it's pretty iconic. And it's what I think of when I think of Videodrome. I think of these scenes. So he sees this program and he's like really excited by it. And next we're at the Rena King show. And this is kind of like a weird, typical 80s daytime talk show where they have 3 guests. And the guests are Max Wren, the controversial president of Civic TV, and Debbie Harry playing Nikki Brand, who is a radio personality, and Brian Oblivion, who is, I don't know what he is. He's like a professor of media.
Yeah. And Brian Oblivion is on television. He is not physically present in the room. He is being played on a screen, on a CRT that is just situated next to the other guests. And we are led to believe that it's a live signal at the time, like he is responding sort of in his own way to Rena King's questions. But we find out later that that is actually not the case.
Dun, dun, dun. And the topic of this talk show is about media violence, media sex and violence. And Rena King says it's like creating a social climate of violence and sexual malaise.
I love that phrase, sexual malaise.
Yes. And Max says it's simply giving viewers a harmless outlet. And, you know, it's just kind of the same arguments that we hear all the time.
Yeah, this conversation is like endless.
Old as the screen itself.
Does consuming violent media make humans more violent? I would argue no. Humans have been torturing each other forever.
Right. And Max is also sort of arguing no there, that he just gives people an outlet for the violent urges they already have. And Nikki says Nikki has like no real morals or philosophy in this.
No.
She's not really a person. She's a fantasy. Ooh, I don't know what that was. And she says that we're living in overstimulated times and it's bad.
It's almost like she was brought on just to sort of be a contrarian in some way, because, you know, she says, like, we live in overstimulated times. We crave stimulation for its own sake, and I think that's bad. And then Max Wren says, well, why are you wearing a red dress? You know what Freud would say about wearing a red dress. and then she says, it's true. I live in a highly excited state of overstimulation. And so it's, you know, she's there, I guess, as just the beautiful, like, quote unquote, female foil, I think, to Max.
Yeah, and to lure him into this larger plot. I mean, she does look great in that red dress. And when he asks her out, when he's like, she says, you're right, I live in a constant state of overstimulation. And he just turns to her and he's like, I'd really like to take you out sometime.
I mean, same.
Right. Yeah. And Brian Oblivion, you know, kind of says a bunch of nonsense on the talk show. He says something like, soon all of us will have special names, which is true, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And like, what's so fun to like analyze about this movie is that it's about such a very particular moment in time with technology and media where, you know, televisions are like big and clunky and analog, but we have this Brian Oblivion who's like talking about like humans like becoming more real through these like personas created on television. But we're not at a point in technology then where like everyone can be showing up on TV, you know, like he very specifically is able to interface with the world that way, but it's not like today where everyone has a smartphone and, you know, we all have screen names or usernames or handles or whatever, and like that is very true. But at the time when this movie was made, like that concept probably felt a little more like far away or convoluted, sort of
futuristic.
I guess it. Yeah, I'm like, I'm like, none of this feels futuristic. Like watching it, I'm like, oh yes, I have to remember 1983. Like,
I know, because it's all about the VHS tape. I mean, what's interesting about this film is it sort of like capitulates from the point that like the VCR and the VHS tape are like the most important inventions in media at the time, and then Cronenberg follows that up years later in with Existenz, kind of like doing the same thing but with video games.
the Existence is like, yeah, that was funny because he just kind of fundamentally doesn't understand how video games work.
I know, it's hilarious. Yeah. It's really funny. And I think in this, at least, David Cronenberg understands how VHS tapes work.
Yeah, like I feel like he really like through the production, through like the physicality of like the television and the tapes and the way things like turn into flesh and turn back into like analog technology. He had like a mastery of like the kind of chokehold that CRTs and tapes and like that analog media had on people.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
absolutely. And
saying?
you're an analog video artist yourself.
I love to think of myself as such. I yeah. Oh, and like I guess yeah, to like position myself in relationship to this technology, like, you know, I first watched this movie on a laptop. And I'm a millennial zoomer cusp, I will say.
Ooh.
I'm millennial leaning is how I like to think of myself. But like basically like I grew up on VHS tapes. You know, like it took my family like a while, I feel like, to upgrade to DVDs. And so like I grew up, you know, sitting in front of a huge CRT, putting my face really close to the screen to like look at the little red, green, blue phosphorescent like squares and like feeling the heat from it and feeling the like static electricity that comes off of the screen when you first turn it on or when you turn it off. And like I don't know if everyone was like that as a kid, but I had a very like physical relationship with TVs. Like they were just very like, you know, like I grew up watching videos and playing video games and like I was definitely a screen baby. Like I went outside also. I also touched grass, but I I definitely like in watching Videodrome later on a MacBook, I remember like really kind of viscerally relating to the way that people like grope the technology in this film.
Yeah, and I think the kind of things that you make are really conducive to that technology because they're so like tactile and physical and
Yeah.
like grimy. And I think that form is just works really well with tapes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're obviously the perfect person to talk about this. And I think, I mean, so much of this film is so dated and yet so prescient, like that idea that we're all going to have nicknames. Yeah, true. And Andy Warhol predicted that too, with his horrible dead ass, that we would all, you know, have our 15 minutes or whatever. And now we all have way more than that. So,
Oh, yeah. It's exhausting.
it is exhausting. Max is with Harlan again, and this time they're watching Videodrome and there's a black man being tortured. And it's notable because Max says, "Who is this black guy? Is he a political prisoner or something?" So they just kind of assume that the black man is a political prisoner, but they don't have anything to say about the women who are being tortured. Like, oh, that's clearly sexual. But it can't be if it's a man.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, who is this, a political prisoner? But no questions about the women being tortured. So they figure out that the signal is coming from Pittsburgh, of all places. And Max goes to meet Nikki Brand at her radio show. What's her radio show?
What, God, the Emotional Rescue Show. At
She's like a
a
dom Dr. Laura.
Yeah, she speaks with a total phone sex voice. She's talking to some woman who's just crying about how much she hates her sister, but she's clearly talking about herself. And the station is called C-RAM, which I just read as cram.
Cram. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's got to be intentional.
I
Like
know,
cramming a tape in.
or like cramming your dick in a hole.
Or cramming your dick in a hole. But I mean, I feel like the whole message of this film is like, but isn't a VCR like a pussy? And a VHS is like a dick.
Yeah.
That's the whole film.
Oh my God. We'll get to that.
Yeah. So Nikki goes to Max's apartment and he asks if he has porn to watch.
Got any porno?
I'm obsessed with her. She's just like perfect 80s phone sex fantasy.
Yes.
And she finds the Videodrome VHS and they put it on. And as they're watching it, she's like, well, take out your Swiss Army knife and cut me.
Yeah. I'm trying to throw myself back to being 12 years old and watching this for the first time. And I'm just like, was this disturbing to me? No, it wasn't. It was intriguing. But I remember feeling kind of sick inside at the same time. Maybe this was a sexual route for me, but yeah. So like he doesn't end up cutting her, but you know, he notices that Nikki already had cuts on her neck and he's like, you let someone cut you like that? And she's like, yeah, what do you think? You want to try a few things? And so
he's such a square.
He is such a so they get naked, and what they try is needle play, essentially. He sticks a needle through Nikki's earlobe and pulls it back out and licks it. Very hot, very sexy.
It's really hot, except that James Woods is disgusting.
I know. I'm like, why do we have to watch his disgusting Republican tongue licking that needle?
Yeah, it's like a lizard tongue.
I hate it. But Debbie Harry is so beautiful.
But it's really hot.
It is.
And it just made me want to remake it with two women.
Oh my God, you're so right.
Because it's a really sexy scene.
Oh my God, like a fucking like butch femme couple.
Yes,
doing this,
that would be hot.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't get a lot of needle play scenes in movies, so I feel like this is very pointed, very canonical in the kinky canon, if you will, because we just don't get a lot of stuff like this.
Yeah, that's very true. I can't think of any other needles through the skin in an erotic context in film.
This film is obsessed with penetration, obviously.
I mean, as most of Cronenberg's films are,
right?
But this is like the apex, like of his sort of like running gag of like, let me put a hole where there wasn't a hole before.
Right.
Like, how many fuck holes can I create, like, on a person?
Videodrome, aka holes. And as we like zoom out on their repulsive sex, we see, not that she's repulsive, I mean James Woods, we see Nikki and Max like fucking in the Videodrome room, and I think this is the first break with reality.
Yes.
And I love that it's a sex scene that advances the plot here.
Yes. I mean, again, sex with Debbie Harry, transformative.
Yes, that would also advance my plot, if you know what I mean. We just did a Verhoeven week for the Patreon where I screened a double feature every single night of the week this past week. It was
so fun.
I'm so glad.
I went to one of them and it was very fun.
Of all Paul Verhoeven films. So we started with his really early work and we ended with Benedetta. And Verhoeven is really into this idea of sex scenes advancing the plot of a film.
But Annie, I don't think sex scenes advance the plot. I think they're superfluous.
Does anybody even know about this off Twitter? Like, is this something that people talk about off of Twitter? I don't even know. I don't even like bringing up Twitter on the podcast because I feel like it's an alternate reality of like
it really
completely crazy, unhinged.
I don't spend any more time on there than I have to.
No, yeah, and I hate when people spend too much time on there. I spend a lot of time on there, but something I hate is when people spend too much time on there and they bring the discourse into like their other work. So the podcast or writing or whatever, and you can tell when people are Twitter poisoned because they're trying to like, because they're trying to like think about any argument that would come at them before they even like make the point they're trying to make, where they're like, well, you see it a lot in articles where people will be like, well, of course, this, and this, and don't come at me with this. And no one was coming for you. You're just on Twitter too much.
Yeah.
And I don't even like to talk about the sex scene discourse on here, even though I can't help mentioning it because I use Twitter so much for work. Just the idea that, you know, there's like a whole faction of Twitter that's constantly talking about how sex scenes aren't necessary for the plot, which I just think is an inane conversation, like starting point anyway. So I don't even like to address it.
Oh, yeah.
But my only lip service will be sex scenes can clearly advance the plot. It happens in Videodrome.
Absolutely.
So the next scene we meet Masha. Love Masha. She's like a severe Russian woman.
Is she Russian or is she supposed to be Greek?
Oh, is she Greek? Okay. I also thought she might be Turkish.
Yeah, I mean, here's where I like wrote this in my notes. Here's where like another like ethnic stereotype type character comes in, and like I was assuming she was Greek just because she brings in her like Apollo and Dionysus film to pitch, and I don't know that I was getting Greek vibes, but what do I know?
And I was getting like Turkish vibes because of the restaurant they go to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, like Mediterranean, like
maybe
area.
We're not really supposed to know.
Yeah. I mean, she's basically like she comes in, she's got this kind of like accent that's a little bit unreadable. She's kind of like I think she's supposed to have like a I don't want to say the word, but like a G slur vibe.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Like she's supposed to be maybe of Roma descent.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was feeling.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like a mishmash of things.
Yeah.
And she brings in this erotic film called Apollo and Dionysus, which is like an artsy erotic film. And
it's barely erotic.
Yeah. And he's like, this is not what we need, Masha. To which I was like, what is this TV channel? And then I was like, okay, it's supposed to be public access. And I used to work at public access in Brooklyn, New York. And public access is a strange place, but you can put porn on public access as long as you don't show penetration. And it has to be late at night. So I was kind of just like, I don't know if the rules were different in Canada in 1983, but what the hell is this channel? And also, like, you don't program public access. Like, it's completely run by the community. Like, people come in and they bring their programs and, you know, you program that. But you're not, like, poaching programming and, like, buying programming. I just thought that was so silly.
I guess I guess the idea is that his station is a little bit corrupt or it's skeevy the way that he's running things.
Word. It's just really funny because public access is like one of the least skeevy enterprises
Yeah,
that
that's what I would assume.
it is.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how they do things in Canada.
I don't know how they do things over in Canada, but over here in fucking America, public access is like one of the last true bastions of free speech. It's completely free speech. That includes hate speech. And, you know, there's a lot of feelings about that. But typically what they'll do is it's community run, and the community makes the program, and that's what makes up the programming, and that's what makes up the public access channel. So if somebody brings in, like, I know where I used to work, if somebody brought in something that was like full of hate speech, like we have to put it on, but they would put it on at like 3 a.m. so that nobody would see it.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it's, you know, public access is like government funded, and it's also funded by cable companies. So every cable company that runs through the public access vicinity, so like in Brooklyn, for example, every cable company that runs through Brooklyn has to give money to public access. Like it's required by law. So that's why Brooklyn has such a huge public access network, because it has a lot of funding, because every cable company goes through there. So
interesting.
Yeah, so it's actually like one of the least corrupt institutions, which is really funny.
Is
but
this
it's
just Cronenberg like writing out of his ass, like not understanding the
I know,
actual machinations of
it's
this?
so funny. So Max asks Masha about Videodrome, and he's very enamored of it, which is also funny to me because I just think it's hilarious that he thinks this program is so good and compelling. I'm like, I mean, it's cool, but it's just people getting tortured in front of a clay wall.
He's like, I think this is what's next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the next big thing, which, you know, I wish. I wish that a bunch of people wanted to watch something that weird. So Nikki tells Max that she's going to audition for Videodrome, and he's really upset about it. And he's like, those Mondo weirdo video guys, like, you don't know what they're capable of. And I wanted to explain Mondo a little bit. Mars, have you ever heard about the Mondo genre?
Vaguely, please tell me.
So they're like a subgenre of exploitation films. They're like these fake documentaries that were made by a lot of Italian directors in the 1960s through the 70s and 80s. They're like these pseudo documentaries depicting sensational topics. So they would do things like weird Asian sex mondo, and it would just be like a montage of like quote unquote strange sexual practices in the Far East. Or they would do it. There was a lot of ones about Africa, like sexual practices or tribal rituals in Africa. And
would Faces of Death be?
Yes, Faces of Death is a Mondo film. It's like one of the most famous ones. So that's it. Yeah, it's like a fake documentary of, you know, bizarre sex and violence. So Max gets possessive with Nikki, and she's like, all right, whatever, anyway. And to demonstrate how serious she is and independent she is, she burns her tit with a cigarette.
Yes.
And it's pretty hot because it's Debbie Harry.
It's pretty hot.
So how do you feel about like Nikki Brand's masochism in this film?
It's let me put my thinking cap on.
Yeah, go for it.
She reads as a very like self-assured, empowered woman who knows what she wants. And I think you're exactly right. Like after this moment of Max Wren like grabbing her by the shoulders and be like, don't go mess around with that stuff. Like being very like weird and macho and protective. And she's like, you got a cigarette, lights it, and is like, "Hey Max, look," and burns herself with it. And he moves to stop her from doing it, which is like interesting because like I guess the visual of someone burning themselves with a cigarette like outside of a sexual context is different. That reads a little more like self-harm. I remember feeling that way when I watched it originally. I was like, it's something feels different about her burning herself in that way in that moment. And then that's the last time we see her like in the flesh, quote unquote. That's the last time that we see her
Not on a TV screen.
not on a screen or not in a hallucination, which I think is interesting. So her masochism, she feels like there's like multitudes and complexities like just under the surface, but every time you feel that way about a character in this film, it's just completely like erased and ripped away from you. And Cronenberg doesn't actually like go deep into any one character's motivations, which goes back to the way that the narrative is disrupted so many times.
Right. Yeah, and it also feels like sadomasochism in this is a conduit for this idea of the image made real. Like pain is what brings you, like is what makes something real almost. And that's also what opens up the receptors to the Videodrome image.
Right.
And the last time we see her in the flesh being like a moment of masochism and pain, I think is probably significant.
Yes.
There's a lot going on, but it's also kind of esoteric. And I think like I honestly see Cronenberg as just like working shit out in this film.
Yeah.
Max meets up with Masha at a restaurant. There's a belly dancer, which makes me feel like it's a Turkish restaurant. And she has info about Videodrome, and she tells him she thinks it's dangerous, more dangerous than the mafia, more political than the mafia. And this is the big reveal which we kind of already knew, which is that Videodrome is not acting. It's real. It's snuff TV. What's snuff, Mars?
Snuff is actual torture and murder. It is actual depiction of violence on video. I guess it could also be photos. Yeah, you did a whole month on this. You launch into it.
Okay, I will. All right, hold on one second. So, snuff films are the stuff of legend. They are apparently films that not just depict, but just recorded documentary murder. So, somebody being murdered on camera. The first known use of the term is from a 1971 book called The Family, the story of Charles Manson's Dune Buggy Attack Battalion, where the author, Ed Sanders, alleged that the Manson family had recorded a bunch of their murders, filmed a bunch of their murders in California, and buried the footage somewhere in the desert. The word snuff originally comes from the idea of like burning the wick of a candle, like snuffing out a life, extinguishing a life.
That's so like campy.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna snuff you out. Like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And snuff films are not real, right? But they sort of are. Like they are, like now that the internet is a thing. There are very much recorded murders. I'm thinking of like the execution.
Rotten.com.
Yeah, Rotten.com, or like the execution of Saddam Hussein even. Yeah. Like we do have actual footage of people being murdered, but at the time, this wasn't really a thing. It's an urban legend. And people used the like maybe the Manson family recorded their murders, but there's no evidence of that. So at the time, in the early 1970s, this was an urban myth that filmmakers started to use to titillate audiences. So there was this low-budget exploitation film titled Slaughter that was made by a husband and wife grindhouse filmmaking team, Michael and Roberta Findlay, and they filmed it in Argentina. And it depicted like a Manson-esque murder cult and was shot without sound because the actors didn't understand English very well. So they have this footage. They have no idea what to do with it. It's kind of bad. So Roberta Findlay had this really great idea to market it as a real snuff film. So when they released this in like grindhouse theaters in New York, people thought it was real, that this was actual footage of actual people being murdered. And the poster said, filmed in South America where life is cheap.
No.
And it was this very like westernized fantasy of like almost hostile type, torture rings where people would pay to torture people on camera and kill them.
Right. So that's very much the origins of like the thought behind Videodrome.
Exactly.
Here.
Yeah. And like feminist groups protested the movie. And the theater owner that showed the film was prosecuted on obscenity charges. So people really thought this was real, which is so funny now in retrospect.
I mean, I guess they did a good job presenting it that way. That was the goal, right?
Right. And for our Snuff Month, we watched a bunch of movies about snuff or films that were mistaken for the real thing, quote unquote. And we also watched a movie called Last House on Dead End Street, which is really fucking brutal. And for some reason is on Tubi, which is
see that one.
Amazing free streaming service that has these crazy unhinged movies on it. So if you want to watch Last House on Dead End Street, it's maybe one of the most brutal and shocking and upsetting movies I've ever seen, which I feel like is saying a lot for me.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's another early film that used the snuff aesthetic and the snuff plotline that I think is really historically interesting. And then when we move into the 1980s, and I'm getting a lot of my research from this book called Killing for Culture, Death on Film from Snuff to Mondo. And it's from the 90s, and then there was a re-release in I think 2013. So that's where I'm getting all of this information. And when we move into the 1980s, snuff film starts to become more films about snuff. So instead of like recreating the snuff film experience. So this comes out of that time. So Masha tells Max that this is real snuff. And she says to Max that the Videodrome has a philosophy, and that's what makes it dangerous. What is the philosophy exactly? We never really learn.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah. That we know like the Oblivion philosophy, we find that out, but we don't really find out like the Videodrome philosophy. Also, Masha is a cougar, and James Woods is like, I'll shower with you anytime if you give me this information. And she's like, I'm sure he would be beautiful. To which I was like, ew, no. But
no, he wouldn't.
He wouldn't, Masha.
You're a bit older than I prefer, she says. And then she leers at a very weird-looking young man who comes over as the waiter.
Yes,
She's
exactly.
Leering, God, Cronenberg just finds the weirdest fucking looking people.
Yeah, he does.
His movies.
Yes. So Max goes to the cathode ray mission.
Which is supposed to, I guess, kind of look like the Catholic mission.
Right, right. Max introduces himself to Brian Oblivion's daughter, Bianca Oblivion. And he really wants to talk to Brian, but she's like, the monologue is my father's preferred method of discourse.
How many men do you know like that?
Right, exactly. Bianca sort of explains like what all the people are doing there, that they're sick and they need the TV to help them feel better.
It's essentially like a homeless shelter where there's these little cubicles where there's busted up CRT TVs playing a very wide array of things on them. And there's like one person per TV. And Bianca's saying, like, they're derelicts because they haven't had access to the cathode ray tube. Television and access to media is like what socializes them properly, essentially. And I feel like, yes, there's something to be said of like your access to popular media, like allows you to navigate the world socially, like in a fluid way, but what they're watching on the screens in the cathode ray mission is so random and disturbing. Like, we see Max Wren walk by a man who's watching I think it is the inaugural first video of open heart surgery on,
Oh, really?
on the TV. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I feel like I saw it. I feel like it's from Faces of Death, actually.
It's so possible because they mentioned Mondo in this. I really wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. And you just get this like schlubby, presumably houseless person is like watching this video, and he turns and looks at Max, and like he smiles directly into the camera, and it's very creepy. So it's like, okay, yeah, sure, this is a rehabilitation center. It's very dubious. This is what we mean when we say like the philosophy here is confusing.
It
like,
is. My note here is I don't really understand, and I don't think Cronenberg does either.
Yes.
Like, so they can be plugged into the world's mixing board.
Yeah, like, what are you saying?
It's all just TV, man.
Yeah, man.
Did you want to explain how the cathode ray tube works?
Oh yeah. So yeah, like when we talk about old school televisions, a CRT, a cathode ray tube TV, is this. It's a vacuum tube. It's made out of glass, lead glass, essentially, to contain like possible X-ray emissions from the inside. And it's a glass tube where electrons are being fired through a vacuum and controlled by like a coil and anodes and diodes and all that kind of stuff. And it basically the electrons hit a phosphorescent screen on the other side, and it lights up and turns different colors depending on the speed of the electron or something. That's like the bastardized version, but basically
That's so cool.
It's a really clunky and kind of dangerous piece of technology. Like, it's a vacuum tube. Like, if you try, there's all sorts of warning labels on an old school TV that's like, do not try to open this up and look at it. It will implode. It's like, they're very difficult to recycle. Like, there's still warehouses full of CRTs, like, across
I have two.
Yeah.
They're really easy to get because you can't get rid of them.
I have 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't really do anything with them. And that's why they're not in, I think there's maybe like one company in the world that still makes them, but yeah, they're not really in production anymore because they're such, they're a bitch to make and they're a bitch to unmake. And so, yeah, like that's kind of what I was saying earlier about how like the technology of that time like really lends itself to like the body horror that we get into.
Totally. That's really good context.
Yeah.
Because it's so tactile and dangerous.
Yeah.
Like a body.
Yes.
Yeah. So Max is now in his apartment with a gun, just hanging out, shirtless, with like a gun harness on.
It could be such a hot look if it weren't James Woods.
Oh no, this isn't the part with. But yes, it could be really hot. But no, he unwraps the paper around the gun. So this is when we first see that he has obtained a gun.
No context,
right?
Just, I don't know. Maybe he feels like he's He's like, I'm getting deep into this Videodrome shit. I better get some protection.
I better get a gun.
Yeah.
Bridie comes over and Max has like a vision of slapping her where she becomes Nikki. So there's the more breaks with reality there. Max picks up a VHS and it starts breathing, which reminds me so much of being on acid. Like, things always breathe when I'm on acid. And like I remember I remember once like opening a pizza box and I was like we had just gotten a bunch of pizza for the trip and I opened the pizza box and it was like breathing, like pulsing like a Cronenberg movie, and I just was like, I can't eat that, man. Like really, like very stereotypically acid casualty.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I know you don't want to talk about production too much.
No,
but
go
like,
for it.
But like,
I just didn't want to research it. But if you want to talk a little bit about it, go for it.
Well, I mean, you know, I've just seen a few behind the scenes things, but like, there like a lot of work went into like creating fake tapes and fake TVs for these sequences. Like we see the tape breathe, and like that's quite literally like a rubber tape that has like a little animatronic like moving part inside of it that pushes through and makes the rubber move. And so like see, and this is just one of those like I'm having that moment where I'm like, when things were practical effects, they look so much better.
But you're right.
And it's not, but the thing about it is that like if you like pause and like rewind and really watch it, it's like, oh yeah, that's clearly not an actual VHS tape. It is a constructed one, like if you really look at it. But the fact is that was an object that was there. Someone was holding that, and we're watching it move in real time on camera. And like it's like there's just something so different. Something so different about watching a physical thing happen than watching the digital approximation of it happen. You know,
completely true.
Even if the digital thing looks extremely, extremely realistic, it's still like uncanny valley. Something is slightly wrong there.
Yes.
But here we're looking at like that was an object that actually moved in a very creepy way in that person's hands.
And it makes the hallucinations so much more real.
Yeah.
Whereas when you see a movie with CGI hallucinations, you're like, it's a hallucination.
Yes.
And with this, it's like it's scary real.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. Sidebar. I told you I watched the movie Men in the theaters recently.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. I know you hated it.
I cannot believe that I paid money to go see it at the cinema.
I don't want to pay for it now.
Yeah, don't. Absolutely not. But so there's some very hyper realistic CGI body horror in it that I feel like if someone knew us on a very surface level might be like, you should go see this movie because you're gonna love the body horror, it's gonna be so you. but like just because someone can like very hyper realistically animate like a vagina popping up on a man and then him giving birth to himself like over and over and over again in like this sickly way, just because it's possible to do it digitally doesn't mean you should, and it doesn't mean that you can conceptually back it up in a way that like makes it like mean anything. I don't know, like, not to say that Cronenberg really conceptually backed up anything here, but the thing is I don't think he was trying to do that.
Yeah, but we just buy it so much more because it's so sincere.
Yeah, it is.
It's very sincere, and like you can see the blood and sweat that went into it.
Yeah.
So Max pops in this Brian Oblivion tape that he's received, where he's monologuing and he's talking about how TV is part of the physical structure of the brain. And like whatever is on TV emerges as raw experience for the viewer. So television is reality. It's kind of this idea of like, if you see something on the screen, are you really experiencing it? Like, is that having an experience? Which I find really interesting in light of like how we talk about media now. and how people feel like they can be traumatized by media or like, you know, whatever. I don't even want to go like too trite with it. I just find this, because like that's stupid, but if we give it any credence, I think it would be this interesting idea that is what we view through the screen, an actual experience that we're having. And like, how do we categorize that experience?
Mm-hmm.
So Oblivion starts talking to Max like, your reality is already half video hallucination. He explains that he had a brain tumor that gave him visions, where the visions he thinks the visions caused the tumor, not the other way around. And when they removed the tumor, it was called Videodrome, and he was like the first victim.
Like, what do you mean they removed the tumor and they're like, here's Videodrome? Like,
what does it mean?
The literal nonsense that comes out of these people's mouths in this film. That's why, yeah, like at this point you're just like, okay, I'm along for the ride. This is a roller coaster. Like none of this really like means anything in like a logical, chronological way.
No, it's hallucinations and ramblings. The Videodrome people like come upon Oblivion as he's talking and strangle him, and like these people in black hoods, and then one of them takes off the black hood and reveals itself to be Nikki, and Nikki beckons Max from the TV, and that's when the TV starts breathing like the VHS tape, and Max caresses this breathing TV as Nikki like beckons to him.
And as he caresses the TV, this huge throbbing like cock vein like shows up on it.
Yes.
And here's where like the idea of like media penetrating the brain, or media like, you know, penetrating you and controlling you, like is made like physical here. You know, like it feels like the object, like we know that it's you know, the likeness of Nikki Brand is on the television, her mouth is on the television, but to me, like the veininess of the CRT in this scene, it's saying cock to me. It's saying
screaming
like,
cock.
Like Max Wren is going to get fucked is the feeling here. And then the iconic moment of him pressing his face into the screen, which is sort of like appears to be flexible or sort of ballooning out. Like if you want to know behind the scenes of how they did that, they used a dental dam, which I just love that.
I know, it's so good.
I'm like, yes, like
I mean, it really harkens back to like how this is very sexual.
Yeah, no, exactly. So they use a dental dam, aka like a sheet of latex, as the screen, and then they had they had a fan or something like blowing air into the screen on the other side so that there was resistance when James Woods pressed his face and his hands into it. And yeah, the effect is stunning.
It looks great. It still looks great.
It does.
Back at the cathode ray mission, Max has come back with the tape Oblivion sent him, and he's talking to Bianca about how he's been hallucinating. And Bianca, quote unquote, explains that Videodrome, watching the program, creates a tumor that induces hallucinations.
He goes, "You let me watch it?"
Right. And Bianca reveals that Brian Oblivion actually died 11 months ago from the Videodrome tumor, and that he stays alive through these thousands of videotapes that he made where he's just monologuing. So Brian helped to create Videodrome, and he thought it was like the next evolution of man to merge with TV. And when he found out that what his co-creators wanted to do with Videodrome, they killed him. And
what did they want to do with Videodrome exactly?
give people tumors that like blends them with the TV, the reality of the TV. Oblivion thought that TV was more real than reality. This is when Bianca says he wasn't afraid to let his body die. And Max watches an Oblivion tape that explains that Brian thinks the tumor isn't a tumor, but actually a new organ, a new part of the brain that's created by watching TV. So, you know, really convoluted, but also kind of interesting that like we would evolve with the TV, which I think, you know, that kind of that idea of like merging with the machine is going to come back with the gun.
Yeah.
So Max is like in his apartment, shirtless in a gun harness, like you said, would be very hot if it wasn't James Woods. And he starts like itching this slit in his stomach with the gun. And as he's doing that, and Mars is scratching their stomach slit also.
I'm like, it's so visceral. Like, as you're saying it, like, I'm literally reaching onto my stomach and scratching where it would be, because it's so, like, it's so devastating to watch for the first time. Like, his stomach torso area just opens up into a pussy, very clearly, not trying to hide it. It's a slit with some labes. Yes. And he and it also is supposed to be a VCR slot. But in this moment, a tape doesn't go in there. You know what? Here's what I wanted to say about this scene. And totally like this makes sense for the time that I watched it when I was 12. Like, watching him stick this gun into his chest pussy, and sort of like the way he stands up and he's like shaking and his hand gets kind of stuck in there and he's like, you know, clearly disturbed. Like, watching that, I was like, that is exactly what it felt like the first time I tried to put in a tampon. like when I was like 13, like, because like I wasn't afraid of, you know, having a vagina, but like having this hole where you don't know what the fuck is all the way up there, like, and you're trying to like explore it for the first time, like I like almost fainted the first time I tried to put in a tampon. I was just so like disturbed by like exploring my own interiority in that way. And so like I feel like
it's very uncanny and abject.
It's very relatable. Like, this scene is just very relatable to me. And it's just really funny watching a cis man go.
Yeah, I mean, Cronenberg makes such trans films also.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And I feel like if I need to like posit my like positionality here in this conversation, I am an FTM transsexual, they them. So that's my lived experience watching this film.
And I'm James Woods. No, I'm more of a Nikki Brand.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, but he makes like very trans movies while being a very cishet man.
I think he just thinks that, like, I think he's just deeply terrified of vaginas in general.
Yeah,
I just think, yeah, he just sees it as this symbol of he sees it as a symbol of like, on a man, it is like the way that one can be controlled, and then like it, like, on a woman, it is like the thing that does the controlling. That's what it seems like to me.
I think that's a great analysis.
Yeah, and you know, we're speaking like very binary terms, because I don't think there's anything non-binary about what David Cronenberg does.
No.
But yeah, yes, Chussy, the Chussy scene,
or is it Stumacy? Because it really is on his stomach.
It's kind of, I would say it's between the what's this called?
His sternum pussy.
It's like Anyway, you'll just have to watch for yourself, folks.
Yeah, you'll just have to watch the VCR Sternum Pussy for yourself. It's really iconic, and James Woods apparently like hated this prosthetic. It was very uncomfortable. Like it freaked him out, like having it on him.
Yeah. I bet it did.
It's really impressive practical effects too, because when he puts his hand inside of it, it goes in really far, or it looks like it goes in really far.
Yeah.
And he fucks his stomach vagina with a gun. So in this world, the VCR player is the pussy and the gun is the penis. And he like fists it and hides the gun in there. But his stomach vag has disappeared. Oh no. What
where'd
does
the
it
gun
mean?
Go?
Damn. Chekhov's sternum pussy gun. It's gonna come back. So Max gets a call from Barry Convex, what a name, who would like to talk to him about Videodrome, and there's a car waiting for him downstairs. And when he gets into this limo car situation, there's like a little CRT in the car, and the spectacular optical logo comes up, and Barry Convex comes on the TV and he explains that Spectacular Optical, like, they make glasses and they also work for NATO, and also they make Videodrome. What?
They're like, we make glasses for underserved communities in the third world and missile guiding technologies for NATO.
I know, it's like hilarious.
Yeah, they're like, we're not even trying to like hide our dichotomy here.
Yeah, exactly. Barry Convex like takes Max into the Spectacular Optical Glasses store, and Max puts on these glasses, and Barry Convex is like, those overwhelm your face. You need something more spidery, which I just thought was really funny.
More delicate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Barry takes out this like prototype machine that looks like a big VR helmet, and he wants to use it to record Max's hallucinations so that he can analyze them. And he explains that no test subjects have returned to normality after being exposed to Videodrome, and they're all in psychiatric care units.
And then he says, you'll forgive me if I don't stick around to watch. I just can't cope with the freaky stuff.
I know, which is hilarious because he's like supposedly creating the freaky stuff. And he says, I think you'll find a little S&M will be necessary to trigger off a series of hallucinations. And why is it S&M, I wonder? Because they only talk about violence. They don't really talk about the combination of sex and violence in this, even though it's completely implied.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, like it's like earlier when Nikki Brand is at the apartment and she's like, got any porno? And Max is like, oh, I have Videodrome. It's just torture and murder. And she says, sounds great. And he says, not exactly sex. And she says, says who? So I feel like that's like the message here is that like
Right.
it's like the S&M is sex, which, you know, that's how you and I live our lives. So.
Right, and that's how we think of sex. It's just funny to see it in a movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cronenberg's got to be a big ass freak, right? Like, am I projecting here?
He better be.
He better be, right? It would be really disappointing if he wasn't.
He'd be doing like a lot of. He would have to be doing a lot of personal research to make the kind of imagery that he makes.
Yeah. Our culture is not a costume, Cronenberg.
Oh
Except it is. The whole thing is a costume. So, yeah, he says, I just can't cope with the freaky stuff, and leaves the room. And he's got this, like, helmet. The VR helmet is like a big glowing brain. And we see this, like, pixelated vision, very, like, early video game-ish imagery. And Max hallucinates Nikki holding a big cat o' nine tails whip, which is very hot. And she hands it to Max, and she's like, all of a sudden, he's in the Videodrome room, and Nikki is on a TV, and her arms are like tied above her head, and with her back to him, she like turns her head around and she says, let's perform. Let's open up those neural floodgates. And Max whips the TV with Nikki on it, and the TV responds like flesh, and Nikki moans on the screen. And his form is really bad. Anyway.
Oh yeah, no, we're watching it. We're like, absolutely not.
You would have really hurt someone, like not in a fun way.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing about like the Videodrome like videos is that like, oh, we're watching snuff. We're not watching consensual S&M. We're watching actual torture where people don't care about real form with how they hold a whip. But in this scene, he's whipping a literal television. So I don't know. Do you have experience whipping a television? Because I don't know, maybe the form's different. Maybe we don't know. Annie.
Yeah, maybe I'm ignorant actually. I've never whipped a television, but if I was gonna whip a television, I think the sexiest would be a CRT.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, like I'm not gonna whip a flat screen.
No, because you could probably damage it. But the way that
and also it's just not sexy. Like flat screen TVs are not sexy. Like modern TVs are not sexy.
They're not.
Yeah.
But in this scene, it's Nikki Brand on the screen, but then it also, as if the channel switches, it also switches to Masha on the screen.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Max wakes up in bed, and we're unsure if this entire thing was a hallucination. Was Barry Convex even real? And he realizes suddenly that he takes off the sheet, and he's sleeping next to a dead Masha who's bound and gagged. And he calls Harlan to come over right away and take photos of what's in his bed. But when Harlan comes, there's nothing there. So they meet back at the lab. Harlan calls in all of a sudden Barry Convex while he explains that he was actually playing Max pre-recorded tapes the entire time. He did not pirate Videodrome at all. It was a setup to get Max involved and to expose him to the Videodrome signal.
And this setup has been going on for like 2 years.
Right.
And Harlan says, yes, 2 wonderful years.
He's
and I'm
like in love with him.
It's really weird. He's an interesting character. I kind of like him. But then by the end, it's very confusing, like what his place is in all of this. Because here's where we get the even more confused philosophy. It's like, okay, we've been playing Max Wren, the Videodrome signal, because Barry Convex and company think that he is like this detestable human who wants to show disgusting things to the public, and they Barry Convex and company are worried about North America getting quote unquote soft. That's the way they put it. They say North America is getting soft while the rest of the world is getting hard, and we need to be pure of mind in moving forward. And therefore, people like Max Wren who want to show snuff and dirty movies to the public are a detriment because they're muddling our minds with junk. Like that's what I work out from that scene.
Well, thanks for explaining it. I was like, no, I'm just going with it. But that makes sense.
Yeah. But it's just interesting because it's like, also, I think it's really funny how they always say North America. The word Canada doesn't leave anyone's mouth, which I just think it's just funny because it's like.
They know like, Americans don't care.
Yeah. The Americans don't care. Or like, the United States exceptionalism, like idea of like, the US is like the pinnacle of media or whatever. And it's like, if you make it in Canada, like your films also have to make it in the United States to be like, I don't know, considered relevant or whatever. And so like they're constantly saying North America. And when, I think what they really mean is the United States and Canada.
Right.
When they say that. But politically at the time, like more specifically in the US, I don't really know about Canada. Like, there were, I guess, early 80s. That's when there was a lot of censorship, right? Regarding like, that's what like the feminist porn wars.
Absolutely.
Were happening,
yeah.
right?
This was very much like on people's lips at the time. So it's very of the time. This idea of like these evil TV executives like poisoning people with filth.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Cronenberg is like for it or against it, or is just exploring
I think he's just like, it's there. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a weird convoluted philosophy because they say like North America's getting soft. Therefore, we don't want them to watch these very hardcore violent things happening.
That's what
because,
confused me.
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe it desensitizes them.
I guess.
To like
That's
real
the
world
idea.
violence. I don't know.
Yeah.
So this is when it gets real gay.
Open yourself to me.
Yeah. Barry pulls out another breathing tape and he's like, open up, Max. Open up to me. And Max's shirt like opens up and unbuttons and reveals his sternum puss. And Barry shoves a VHS into it and Max collapses on the floor while he starts hearing Barry in his head saying, give us channel 83. Kill your partners. Kill them. Like programming his brain. And Max reaches into his stomach, vagina, and pulls out the gun that he hid from before. And the gun starts to, in a really stunning piece of practical effects, merge with his hand, creating this like really grotesque fleshy weapon that is one with his body. It's great.
It is. And then it's like this was the literal act of being penetrated by media and being programmed by it. And then he goes to the TV station and he kills his partners. And
he like leaves the building and he goes to the cathode ray mission. And this voice inside his head of Barry Convex is telling him, kill Bianca Oblivion. And he confronts her and she explains to him, like, you're being programmed by Videodrome. Like, you're an assassin for them now. And Bianca shows him a TV with Nikki being killed on the Videodrome program, saying they used her image to seduce you. Like, she's been dead a while. Which I was like, was she ever there? Like, were they ever, did they ever even meet? Or is this just some woman they used her image? Because the talk show is so surreal that it could very well be a hallucination. So more Dental Dam TV action.
Oh, yeah.
This, like, it looks like a fucking dick, like, shooting through the Dental Dam TV, and it shoots Max in the chest. And his chest with bullet holes appears bleeding on the TV. And Bianca says it's always painful to remove the cassette to change the program. So she tells him that he's become the video word made flesh. And my note is, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah. and here's the fucking thing that everyone loves to quote from this movie of long live the new flesh.
Yes.
And we don't know what the new flesh is.
I'm assuming it's like a transhumanist thing, like the merging of the machine with the flesh, which I think is also, like, you know, Cronenberg is really interested in transhumanism, which I think is also why his movies come off as so trans. You know, this idea of merging with the machine. That's also like a crazy TERF conspiracy theory that like trans people are trying to merge people with the machine. Like,
no
that is,
way.
Yeah, like transgenderism is just like the gateway to transhumanism.
Cool.
I know, that's the funny thing. Yeah. I'm like, sounds
actually,
cool.
I'm like, no, actually the transhumanists are actually just doing weird things like inserting like light up GPS like things under their skin. Like it's actually not that cool.
It's not like as cool as the like TERFs make it sound. Like, it's not this like satanic trans agenda, because I would sign up for that.
Yeah, point me in that direction.
Yeah, exactly.
See, I
So,
don't, I don't, I don't, I don't pay attention to like nuanced turf discourse. So I'm like, oh, news to me. Like, cool.
is there such a thing as nuanced turf discourse? I don't even pay attention to discourse. I just like pay attention to their theories because I think it's really important because I think it's part of like the rise of fascism.
Oh yeah.
But I watch videos from smart women about like turf theories, so I don't have to read them.
Yeah, that's the better way to do it.
So I know
Talk
a
about
lot
being
about their
traumatized by
crap.
media.
Yeah, right. Which like their shit is poison, and it's much better to engage with it filtered, in my opinion, because it really is like poisonous. So Max sees another houseless person with a TV broadcasting a news story about the shooting. He's now a wanted man. And he goes into the Spectacular Optical Glasses store and meets the sales guy with the weird Jamaican accent.
So random.
It's so fucking random. And he sees Harlan in the back. And Harlan is like, got your head in this box. Everything is just like total entropy surreal now.
Yeah.
And he asks about Bianca, and he says that they want to keep using Max, and he takes out this even more grotesque, fleshy VHS. So everything is getting like more and more grotesque and fleshy, these machines. Mm-hmm. And he says again, open up to me. And Max opens his shirt, and Harlan sticks the VHS in his stomach, and it's like very homoerotic. Mm-hmm. Like they're fucking. But Max's vagina consumes Harlan's hand, like stripping it of all its flesh until it's like this weird stump.
And I think he replaces it with a pipe bomb, essentially.
Right, yes, because Harlan blows up. And before Harlan blows up, Max says, see you in Pittsburgh. Max goes to this Spectacular Optical trade show to find Barry Convex, where there's this like very strange, campy performance going on with these dancers.
How would you describe that?
I don't even, it's like a weird like Vegas review with like these very fruity dancers in like sequin Renaissance outfits, and we learn that like they're wearing those because their new line of glasses is called the Medici line.
Oh, yes.
So it's like very fruity and weird. Barry Convex comes out on the stage, and Max, his flesh gun has become even more grotesque, and he approaches the stage and he shoots Barry Convex dead and says, "Death to Videodrome, long live the new flesh." And Barry's body rips apart, and it looks like some kind of fleshy creature is emerging. And my note here is tumors, question mark.
To me, it wasn't that a new creature was emerging. It was just like every organ in his body suddenly was autonomous and was trying to like crawl outside of himself. It was like,
that makes more sense.
Yeah, it was like it's like he got shot in the chest, and it's like we can believe that that is the physical reality of what happened, because everyone else at the convention is like screaming, running away. Someone got shot, but then what we see happen to his body afterwards, like that's where we're like, is this actually what happened? Is that a hallucination? Is his body particularly special, and that's why it's behaving the way it is? These are the questions we are left with.
Right. So Barry's toast. Max goes to this deserted pier, and he like enters this condemned ship, and he finds this bare mattress. There's a lot of themes of like houselessness in this film, actually. Yeah. And I hadn't thought about it too deeply, but it comes up again and again. And it comes up yet again in this ending scene. Like it looks like there was a squatter there or something. And as Max is like on this spare mattress, he says, I was hoping you'd be back. And we see now that there's a TV with Nikki on it now. And she explains, like, death is not the end. And Videodrome still exists, and it's very big and complex, and you've hurt them, but you haven't destroyed them, and it's time to move into the next phase. You need to go all the way into total transformation. Don't be afraid to let your body die. Come to Nikki. And she shows him this image on the TV of him shooting himself in front of a fire. And when he pulls the trigger on the TV screen explodes with organs, which, now that you've explained the cathode ray, that's even more interesting to me, that part.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like truly like plausible that a CRT could explode. I know for a fact that it took them like 24 hours or something to shoot that scene to get it right.
Jesus
Like,
Christ.
it's like they set it off once and it did not work out, and they had to reset it, and it took like 12 hours to redo it. And but I'm like, the passion behind it, I admire it.
Right. I mean, it looks great.
It does.
And in front of the wreckage, which is now on fire, mimicking the image we just saw on the TV, Max repeats that image and shoots himself with the flesh gun. And before he dies, he says, "Long live the new flesh." And credits roll. And that's Videodrome. I don't think that there's really like a cohesive message there.
Nah.
You said you think it's very Catholic.
Oh, did I say? Oh, I wrote that in my notes just in reference to the way that they're talking about the new flesh, like in this very like
communion.
Yeah,
this is
like
my
communion,
flesh.
he's shooting himself, he's sacrificing himself, like type of thing. And I was just thinking about the cathode ray mission, like Shelter, and how like the set design in Brian Oblivion's like office like has all this like sort of like mystical Christian
it's very like clerical.
Yeah, and I feel like Cronenberg sprinkles that in and then doesn't really do much more with it. But like, there's a lot to be said about like Catholicism and S&M.
Absolutely.
I'm a baptized Catholic. I know that you're not.
No, I'm going to hell. I'm a dirty Jew.
I think I'm going right there with you, honestly, at this point. Yeah, I mean, I can't turn on that part of my brain right now, but
that's okay. We've talked for so long.
Yeah, we really have. But it's just one more like little like connection that was sprinkled in but never fully elaborated on. There were just so many of those in this movie, and I think that's why so many different kinds of people enjoy this movie and can get a lot out of it, whether it's the sex or the tech or the like mass conspiracy like theory plot line. There's a little something for everyone in this movie.
So I think we'll end there. So Mars, where can people find you on social media if you want them to?
If I want them to. You can find me on Twitter at MistrXMars. Mistrx spelled MISTREXX. That is my honorific for no particular reason other than it felt slightly better than mistress. And that's my dom work zone. And you can also find me in other places, and I think the queers that want to find me will find me.
They will. Yeah, they will. And Mars has made a commercial for me that you've probably seen. for
Oh my
Girls Guts
gosh.
and Jello Snuff Month.
I don't know if you noticed this, but in the beginning of that video I made you when I did the little motion graphic for the snuff that like comes down, like I totally was taking inspo from the Civic TV like
Yes.
animation.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's absolutely like that. And you know where to find me. Girls Guts and Jello. No, Girls Guts Jello on Instagram. And I'm on Twitter as Girls Guts GLX now. And you know, I'm everywhere. Patreon.com/girlsgutsjallo. Google Girls Guts Giallo, Google Annie Rose Malamet, you'll find me. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, Mars, for joining.
Of course.